Hi guys, it's Erin with Hand Stamp Style, and in this video for the next few minutes here I'm going to explain some tips and helpful information in using your Big Shot and dies and different things that come with them. If you look in the catalog, this is our current catalog, our annual catalog, starting on page 188. Yeah, 188, well 186 really, technically. It starts to explain all the different products. On the very first page it talks about a crease pad and your cutting pads, those clear plates that I just showed you. And there's two different sizes. So let me just show you. There's a standard size, which is this size right here, okay? And then there are extended, and they're this size. Now I don't have the silicone or the crease pad in the extended yet, but this is how long it would be. And what would be the purpose of using those two different items? Well, let me tell you. So if you're using a regular die, and this would probably be the only time that you would not use this right here. Okay, if you're using what I call a die, a Big's die, a real thick one, then you would use this with just one cutting pad, your item, whatever material you were going to cut, and then a cutting pad on top, and just this sandwich would go through your machine. That's it. Okay, so for this particular die, this is an extended Big's die, XL maybe they call them. This is just cutting. There's no scoring on this die. This is the Tastefully Trim. It's like one of my favorite. I don't think you can see the pattern on there, but if it's just going to cut, then you would use the cutting pad or the cutting plate for the top. If it's just cutting. Now, if it is, let me get this one out. If it is going to score, this one is actually the Peekaboo Frames. And you probably can't see the outline of these patterns, but they're different shapes of frames, and some of the areas are scored and then some areas cut. With a die like this, you always want to use this as your top layer, the crease pad. Why is that? Well, when you're putting cardstock through, sometimes due to the pressure of the machine, if you use the clear plates, it will cut through the areas that should be scored. So when you use the crease pad, it only cuts where it's supposed to cut and it scores where it's supposed to score. The other thing I recommend is on a die that scores and cuts, I don't recommend that you do several sheets of cardstock at one time, because the ones at the bottom closest to the cutting portions of the die will typically, the score lines will typically score so deeply that they end up cutting when you fold them, or they'll just cut directly through them. So on any die that has like folding, or it's like a 3D item that obviously is going to score certain areas, I recommend you use the crease pad on top, and then you would use a clear cutting pad or cutting plate at the bottom, so it would look like this. Okay. Okay, so we've got the big dies that I just showed you there, and they come in standard size and then the big long size. We also have the embosslets. These are fantastic, and the reason why I love them so much is they actually emboss and cut out all at the same time. So this particular flower, this is actually retired, it will cut out the flower, but do you see all those little lines? It embosses all those little lines. It is really, really cool. However, if you'll notice, and this is again, you'll kind of need to read certain things, it says place this side down. So you need to place this face down on your cutting plate in order for it to, it'll still work if you do it the other way. However, over repeated use, what will end up happening is if you use it the wrong direction, these start to curve and bend like they're not supposed to, okay? And eventually it'll start to separate, and that's not supposed to happen. So be sure that you're putting the right side down, the correct side down, and using the pieces properly. We have embossing folders, and I had a few more out here. There they are. We have embossing folders, and there's a little bit of a difference. These are different, I guess, accent or edge type folders that just do like a strip of pattern. And then we have, I call them old and new. They're different sizes now. The old ones that we used to sell were this size. And it basically was just large enough to do not even really a full card front. It was really perfect for like a 5 1/4 by 4 inch piece of cardstock. Whereas now the larger size, although you cannot send it through the machine, you can't send it through the machine this way because you can see it's too long on either end. You have to send it through like this. However, the benefits with the new design is it is actually big enough to score or to emboss an entire card front. So what is that? 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. It's large enough to emboss that. And because you can't send it through sideways, you actually now, with this new design, you can actually fold it over the edges. So those are some embossing folders. And then we have little embossing frames, and they emboss that little shape there. Now just know when you emboss your cardstock, there is a good possibility that certain areas will be stretched so much that the fibers may weaken enough to sometimes come apart. That's normal. There's a lot of pulling done when you send it through the big shot, when you send it through on an embossing folder. So that's really normal. You can cut down on that a little bit if you spray your cardstock with water. I don't really mess with it. Usually it doesn't bend it enough to ruin it. And most people can't even tell unless you're really anal about that stuff. So those are the embossing folders. And then we have some what they call sizzlets, and they're just thinner dies like this that come in different sizes. Some of them are big like this, some of them are kind of small. They're like maybe 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. And these are great. These are thin. These really only do one piece of cardstock at a time. And the thicker the cardstock, depending on how intricate, this is the doily, so it's pretty intricate. I run it through maybe once or twice. Now sometimes that'll, double cut lines, but for me it's not a big deal because it's easier to get them out. However, with the big dies like this, you sometimes, depending on if it's a score one or not, you can put several pieces of cardstock into several at a time. The Tastefully Trim die that I use, I put 3 or 4 pieces of cardstock on there and cut them all at once. It does a great job. So these are thinner. You can't put as much fabric or as much material on here. These work pretty much on everything except you can't use it like for metal or depending on how thick the metal is. You can't use it on metal or wood or thick like leather, things like that. You can't cut through this. Now the big ones, the thick dies, those pretty much work with almost everything. Yeah, so that's basically how these go. And you really want to try and keep the little pieces of paper from staying in your die too long. I just used this yesterday actually. And a tip somebody gave me, and it kind of works pretty well, depending on how deep the paper is stuck in these, is you just take a piece of packing tape. When you have the little pieces of paper, take a piece of packing tape and just run it over this like so. With these little ones, I really have to kind of stick my fingernail in there and then just peel it off, and it usually takes all the little pieces of cardstock off. So it works really well. And then we have, and I showed you this earlier, we have these framelits, and these are really awesome. Many of them now that we have stamp sets that coordinate with them. So you can stamp your image and then put this on top, and it cuts out a perfect shape. A tip I will give you with these is, because you're sandwiching these between your two cutting plates, it really does not matter if you're using it face up or face down. Now, let me explain. There is, I don't know if you can see this, there is a little lip on one side, and when you get them, one side's flat, and then one side, oh, can you see that? One side's raised, just like that, okay? The raised side is the side that cuts, okay? So if you're actually cutting out a stamped image, you wanna make sure that you're putting down the side that actually cuts, and you can see your stamped image through it. Now, in order to keep it from moving when you send it through the machine, a suggestion I have is if you have this on your, we're just gonna pretend like our stamped image is this butterfly. You're gonna place this over the butterfly, and then I use like a sticky note to hold it and the framelit in place while it goes through the Big Shot. And I would basically just stick it right down to my cutting plate, okay? Now, the other great benefit to these is if you're doing multiple images, you can actually send them all through at the same time, depending on how, you know, how big your framelit is. And you can also use them face up if you just want to, if you just want the shape, you can put them face up and place your cardstock right on top of it. And these little edgelets, I use them the same way. These are really for the, like, to get a decorative edge on a piece of cardstock. I hold them in place with a Post-it note as well, and it works really, really great. That way my lines are straight, and I don't have to waste cardstock trying to cut it straight after the fact. Okay, so those are the framelits, and then there are dies like this that you can actually see through, and these are really great too because you can actually stamp, or what I think is even better for these, let's say you wanted to use this for an invitation or something like that, and you wanted to print something out of your computer and be able to cut it out in the shape, you can actually print it and then place it underneath, so you can actually center it and make sure that it gets, you know, in the right spot, and then cut it out, and you actually poke your finger through so you can actually pop that paper out. And there, I think this style comes in like 3 different shapes. There's like a scallop square and a scallop circle, I believe. I hope this is helpful to you, and if you have any questions, please, please, please post them at the end of this video, and I would love to answer those for you, or you can email me, and I would love to help you out with that as well. So I hope you enjoyed this helpful video, and have fun with your Big Shot. Bye.